If you haven't already watched the first part of this video, then why are you watching this? It's marked part 2 for a reason. It's like starting Jojo with battle tendency instead of phantom blood. Go watch that and then come back here, otherwise this won't make much sense to you. For those of you that need a refresher, Jonathan Joestar is essentially a coked-out coke-fail son who teams up with his hedge fund manager and his parasitic cheerleader to end an uprising started by our working-class hero, Dio. It's a very sad story, to be sure. Now, I know what you're thinking.
Who among us?
Among us.
And you'd be right. At the end of the last video, I said this. Let's start breaking everything down character by character. I will now do just that, so like and subscribe for me keeping my promise. Let's get into it.
Yo, y'all can't stand right here. In his right hand was your man's worst nightmare. Loud enough to burst his right ear, don't kill strange. The game is not only dangerous, but it's most strange.
People look at Elon Musk or REO Speedwagon and see one of two types of people. One sees a loud, quirky fellow who speaks from the heart and uses their fortune for the betterment of society. The other sees a person who took advantage of the work of people smarter than him to amass a fortune that prolongs the suffering of those below him. Let me break it down for you in its most simple form. Close your eyes and think about Elon Musk. Think about his "I'm better than you" smile and his desperately clinging on to what little youth he has left haircut. Now think about Speedwagon. Think about his phony, chipper, notice me Jojo senpai attitude and his hiding my early onset baldness top hat. What do these two clowns have in common? I'll give it to you in one word. Parasites. Now, just to clarify, I'm not saying that either of them have parasites. They might, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm saying that they are parasites. Let's get into it, shall we?
Yeah, well, look, he's gonna make you look great. Maybe you could paint me with hair.
We'll start by talking about everybody's favorite slaver turned rocket boy, Elon Musk. For those of you who don't know, Elon Musk finds the roots of his wealth within the emerald mines of his home country, South Africa. Here he lived as sort of a boy king while his family exploited the labor of hundreds if not thousands of workers digging tirelessly in search of green gems, the profits of which they would never come close to seeing. It was with the money extracted from this workforce that Musk was able to finance his first venture, X.com. I know you may be asking yourself, wait a sec, isn't this just the story of Dr. Robotnik and the Master Jewel? And although it does match up almost perfectly, the website is in fact not a tongue-in-cheek reference to the animated series Sonic X. While X.com was a venture started primarily by Musk, it would also be the very first and last thing that he produced himself. One could say that X.com was the cocoon stage of Elon's parasitic metamorphosis. During his Emerald Fortune days, he was a mere pupa, a little squirming thing that subsisted off the sustenance of its progenitor. If X.com was the cocoon, then PayPal would be the unfortunate host that a now matured Musk would latch onto, but like any parasite, Elon's hunger could not be satiated by any singular victim. PayPal was only the first to fall, as Tesla, SolarCity, and SpaceX would soon fall into the gravitational pull of the Muskosite. Unlike Musk, Robert E.O. Speedwagon actually built his cocoon entirely on his own. Rather than being given a crumb of daddy's money to get the ball rolling like Elon, Speedwagon climbs his way up the criminal ranks the old-fashioned way. Now, it should be clear that both of these individuals ultimately get to where they are through exploitation, violence, and thievery. The villainy of each, however, is entirely in the eyes of the beholder. Speedwagon is clearly worse, though, and anybody who says different is wrong. I probably should have put one of these earlier in the video, but I'm about to spoil a little bit of part 2 called Battle Tendency, which is a clever reference to the tendency for people like REO to foster an environment where members of the working class battle amongst themselves instead of directing their anger toward the true evils in our society. Here come the spoilers. Speedwagon funded Nazi research. That's it. Now let's spin the wheel and figure out which randomly selected character from our cast we'll talk about next.
Won't sound like they in a talent show, so I give them something to remember like the Alamo. Tally ho, a hot joker like Spain's game. Came back from 5 year lane and stayed the same.
You're probably asking yourself, how can you go lower than a combination of Adolf Hitler and the enemy of Sonic the Hedgehog? Well, You can't, but let's compare oranges to apples here and look at Baron Zeppeli, disgraced former hedge fund manager to the beneficiary of compound Hammond known as Jojoster. The Baron's real-world analog is another man with friends in high places, Jeffrey Epstein. Jeff and the Baron are arguably most famous for ending their lives under mysterious circumstances, but the similarities go much, much deeper. If you're unfamiliar with either of these individuals, consider this a content warning for what's to come. The heaviest topics discussed in this section will be sexual trafficking and suicide. Both Epstein and Zeppeli have spent their lives bringing others into their fold in order to secure some sort of compensation. For Jeff, this was financial security, using compromising situations as leverage to ensure his interests were met. Using an island of trafficked minors, he would invite guests over to live out their depraved fantasies. These visits were documented with both photographs and logbooks, so there was some kind of blackmail in the pocket in case it was ever needed. In 2019, Epstein was charged for sex trafficking, something he had already been in prison for over a decade prior. Fortunately, for those who frequented his island, Jeff was found dead in his cell on August 2019, and shortly thereafter, the charges against him were dropped. It is still debated whether he had taken his own life or if he was executed to prevent those in power from being brought to justice. Unlike Epstein, Zeppeli's security was a bit more nebulous. It wasn't financial, at least not on its face, but more so to align himself and his allies with who he assumed would win in a battle between the bourgeois and the proletariat. The Baron funded Joester through Hammond, believing it would give him an edge against Dio's uprising and land him a cozy spot in power after Jonathan crushed his opposition. The connection to Epstein's story becomes a bit clearer when you realize that Zeppeli dies while explaining his, up until this point, hidden knowledge. It is here that we learn of Zeppeli's impending doom, as though he was aware that he would eventually be executed in a prison. His death only benefits the people who would have rotted away in a dungeon if he was able to avoid this fate. Immediately following this sacrifice, we are introduced to the Baron's associates, eager to join the crushing of a workers' rebellion. It's a tight-knit group of powerful people who are all benefiting from Zeppeli's death, and knew it was coming. Okay, can we all agree that Araki went a little overboard when it came to the ham-fisted imagery on the cast surrounding Jonathan? Like, I get it, you need to make them unlikable, but using the most notorious sex trafficker of all time seems like a cheap substitution for creating a uniquely despisable character. I mean, come on. Even the names sound similar. Zeppeli, Epstein.
Suspicious.
Let's spin the wheel and see who's next on the queue, and I'm really hoping it's Dio so we can have a little brevity in all this darkness.
I sell rhymes like dimes. The one who wants to keep cash and brag about the broken times. Better rhymes make for better songs. It matters not if you got a lot of what it takes just to get along.
Alright, if you want a breakdown of Jonathan's character, just rewatch my first video or something. Here's a brief summary before we move on.
My father said to me, Jojo, you can do whatever you want to in life, but just make sure you do it well and you do it with passion. Every day I go to the office, I enjoy creating the hormone. Be bold means to me, be authentic, be real, be yourself, be confident, and always be a gentleman, but still have that tenacity that no one can take away from you. I want it to be able to be worn in the boardroom, or in a discoteca, or a nightclub, or on a yacht. I really wanted to create something that's fun, outside the box, cool, trendy, yet really bold and interesting.
I honestly don't know what Araki was thinking when he decided to focus on the villain of the story. Even if it would be a bit bog standard, focusing on the protagonist of Phantom Blood would have made for a much more engaging story.
When it's his time, I hope his soul go to heaven. He nasty like the old time, old number 7. He still tastes it when he chase it with the Coca-Cola. Make him wish they couldn't race it out the Motorola.
Over the years, I've come up with a lot of ideas for original, well-written protagonists. For example, Ham Bonin, a hillbilly samurai who uses spoons in battle. or even Shane, the main character of the hit series Life as the Last Shane. Even with these examples in mind, I don't think I would ever dream up a character quite as haunting, daunting, or lovable as Araki's first protagonist, Dio Brando. We can't give Araki all the credit in the world, even if he does deserve the lion's share of it. Viewers like us, viewers with a keen eye and sharp sense of smell, know where he channeled the inspiration for the great Dio from. I've said it before, but for those of you who skipped part 1, I'll say it again. Dio Brando is, without a doubt, directly inspired by the life and philosophy of famed revolutionary, philosopher, and all-around swell fella, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. How, you might ask? Well, let me break it down for you. Vladimir Lenin, or Volodya, as he was known in his youth, came from humble beginnings. The son of a working-class father and petty bourgeois mother, Lenin was no stranger to hardship. For the first several years of his life, his family was much like any other in the feudal Russian state, albeit with some minor advantages in the form of his educated parents. Unlike Dio, however, Lenin would share his modest home with 7 siblings, ensuring the family's meager advantages were stretched that much thinner. This would all change as Lenin reached young adulthood. By the sweat of his brow and through the toil of labor, Lenin's father was granted the title of hereditary nobleman for his work in the schools of the Volga Federal District, a trajectory not unlike our protagonist, Dio Brando. Dio, too, was raised in humble beginnings.
You get yourself to the Joestar, imagine.
Araki's desire to create a hyper-realistic world for his characters, however, led to his choosing to make his Lenin stand-in far more disadvantaged than his real-life counterpart. After all, the story of Jojo's bizarre adventure is one of blood, sweat, and turmoil, and its protagonist should reflect the struggles that the working class across the globe must endure under capitalism, but I digress. Essentially, both Dio and Vladimir Lenin share a similar backstory. Humble beginnings, hardship and dedication, all culminating in a sudden jolt to the upper echelons of society. They both faced many challenges and setbacks but continued to press forward, and both saw their legacies erased by lesser men. To conclude, I would like to say thank you to the person watching this. I thought this would be uploaded a month or so after the first part. Well, we all have our regrets. However, I am glad to finally have this finished so I can talk about something other than Jojo. My next video will probably be an analysis of Squid Game, since I have yet to see anyone compare it to the 90s Disney film that it was an obvious tribute to. Even if it's many months from now, I hope to see you there. Goodbye.
No friend to fall back. If you want what they got, then go get it. It's all gap. Only in America could you find a way to earn a healthy buck and still keep your attitude on self-destruct.